All right, good afternoon. This is Lynx. I am doing another video here in my series relating to questions people have about their pain, their obstacle, problems, the biggest challenge when it comes to reading for people, for others, for themselves, professionally, not professionally, whatever the deal. So I had a question from someone which actually several people have asked in various different ways. So the way that this person phrased it was they have a hard time giving a remedy or approach that doesn't sound cliche when they're doing readings. So they're coming up with a remedy. They're trying to give them, so someone comes in for a reading, they're trying to give a remedy or an approach that doesn't sound cliche or that gets sort of to the heart of the matter. And this particular person thought that perhaps they weren't getting deep enough in the reading, which is a possibility. And I wrote some notes here so that I don't get off track. In response to that, and people do this, you see this all the time in readings. Someone will, and those of you who've had professional readings, you could go to someone and then you're hoping to get a certain answer, and then what you get sounds kind of vague or doesn't. This is something to consider from the reader's perspective here, what I'm about to say now. So my question then is, how big is your experience in the area that you're reading about? So often people assume that being psychic or being a reader means that you're omniscient, means that you're going to reach into the ethers and pull out exactly the right answer that person needs that will change their life forever and ever. And in some cases, you really can. You be on a point where a person's at a crossroads or a precipice. One thing you tell them, boom, shifts everything for them, and they go in that direction, and it changes everything. You can develop ways to do that. The more you read, the more you practice, the more you learn how to spot those situations and how to do that. So that takes time. But how big is your experience in the area you're reading about? So, for example, if someone's asking you about big business and you have no experience in there, you can get what you get from the cards. And in some cases, it might make sense to the person in a sort of vague way. So you might say, hey, there's a dark-haired man, and there's a new prospect that he's bringing to you, and there's a woman that is another prospect, and you're faced with a choice. Go with the man. He's going to not lead you astray. So you could do something like that, in which case that would be very specific. But quite often people come to you and they'll say, hey, what's my life's purpose? And I go, hey, that's a question that that they have to come to themselves. That the answer, you can't tell someone what their life's purpose is. You can help them find ways to get it, and I do that. I have different methods and different things that I've developed and different tools I've developed over the years to get people to start asking questions that lead them to an organic understanding or an emergence of their own understanding of their own purpose, but to say, hey, the gods say this is why you're here. That's this approach now. There's this sort of, I noticed it from the beginning when I started reading, there's an approach where they say that you've planned everything before you came here, and some people will come to you expecting you to figure out what they planned, and I go, it's your mythology. Why are you expecting me? If you planned it and you knew it all before you came here, what's the problem? And then there's all sorts of theories about why you can't remember and all that stuff, and I, frankly, I'll be honest, I don't buy it. I don't buy that people come here and have these horrible experiences because they have to learn about love or some whatever. It's. Can I just stare for a minute about that? Anyway, so it's not that, okay, if that's what you believe, great, but prove it. What's your reason? What's your purpose? Okay, great. But if you believe that, but then you expect someone else to tell you it, I think that's kind of flimsy. And if you take it on yourself to do that, I think you're in trouble. So how big is your experience in the area that you're reading about for that person? If they're like, hey, this is my life's purpose, and you haven't really figured out your life's purpose, or you don't know what's going on in a person's subconscious or how to help someone get through their subconscious, it could be a challenge. And if there's only so far you can get with the cards. There's only so far you get with the cards. So be realistic and ask yourself, how much experience in this area do I really have? If I'm not really happy with what I'm doing in my life, And I haven't figured out how to do my purpose is how can I tell someone else? That's the thing that you see with teachers all the time. You're like, I used to teach in an art college, and I was teaching in a writing department, and there were a lot of people in that department that had taught that had never been published, and they were trying to tell people how to get published, and I'm like, how are you telling these people how to? You never publish, So ask yourself, how much experience do you have in that area? Second, sometimes the answer isn't something the person wants to hear or do, so the answer is limited that you get. So for example, I've had people come to me and say, well, how can I get this much money by this much time? And it's like, go out and get another job, work for people, do chores for the neighbors, things like that, stuff like that. That's what comes up. It's like, if you really want this, then go make it happen. Go to the neighbors, ask them if there's anything they need, make that money, because I need to make this bill by this. And you ask them, they're like, I'm not going to do that. That's not right. That's not what that's what came up. And that's what you could do. Are you willing to do what it takes to get the answer that you supposedly want? So, I want to make several $1 million and drive a Jag. Well, then go into a corporate job, work your way up, spend 15 years of your life getting to that point, and invest in it. And sometimes that's what comes up. You need a traditional approach. So someone comes to you and they have a little tiny business doing, I don't know, something maybe really off, and they're like, well, how do I make $3 million doing this? And it doesn't look like it's coming up. And it's like, either it's their approach, they're not thinking big enough, they're not wanting to invest bigger. And so you go, okay, maybe you need to partner with someone else in this case. And they'll be like, no, I don't want to do that. So the answer's there, but they're not willing to do it, or they don't want to hear about it. And in some cases, like especially if an emergency comes up, well, this is an emergency, invest in this, do this for a short period of time and make the money. And they're like, well, I was expecting to hear how it would fall in my lap. I'll tell you, one time when I first started, I had a client. He came to me. I was working in a shop, and this guy came to me, and I did this reading, and he was like, yeah, he's like, you just told me everything that's going on in my life. And I said, okay. And he goes, and that's not why I came to you. I wanted you to tell me I was going to win the lottery. And I was like, it's not in here. You're not going to win the lottery. I didn't see it. And he was very upset, and he's like, I wasted my money here. And he could have taken some steps to actually make something happen for himself, but he didn't. He wanted it to come like that, and he wanted to know that that's the way it was going to come. So he took a gamble getting a reading, hoping he would hear that he was going to win the lottery, and there was nothing there. And so sometimes it isn't in the cards, and that's another thing here. So sometimes they come to you expecting to tell them something that isn't in the cards, and that's a good example of that case. So sometimes they're like, well, how do I take this business and turn it into this? And you're like, and you see that they're not really very strong in that business, and you go, well, you have some foundation stuff to do. You have to start at the beginning because it's not really there. It's not showing up. And sometimes people will say, well, like about a relationship, well, tell me what's in my relationship future. And you'd be like, it's just not there. So what do I do to get a relationship? Well, stop pushing people away. Stop being angry. Stop being bitter. Stop bringing up your past relationships. Stop saying, woe is me. Stop telling yourself that you're not worthy of it. Stop making public decrees about how lonely you are and how miserable you are, how it's never going to happen for you. And you tell someone that and they don't do that, and so you see it's never going to happen because they keep telling themselves over and over, they keep putting themselves in a position where somehow they get some power over being the jilted lover or the lover that never was, because it's convenient. It gives them something. It gives them some reason to continue to live the life, because it's easier when you don't have to invest in someone else and consider them. And sometimes people set it up for themselves so they don't get that. And that whole soulmate thing. Where's my soulmate? Sometimes there's where's my soulmate? I get that all the time. People, where's my soulmate? Tell me when my soulmate's coming. It's like, I missed him, didn't I? It's like, you have several good loves in your life, probably, if you're healthy. I've seen it, I don't know how many times. Someone will go through a relationship, they either lose them, someone dies, or they make the wrong choice the first time they get involved, and then they have a bad relationship, they break up, and then they go through a renewal, and then they find someone they love just as much or more. So this whole, what's my soulmate, that's another thing that's been taught to people in all these books and everything about, so you come here before you and you plan your life, and all these horrible things are going to happen to you, and you're going to meet soulmates. Remember this, there's a lid for every pot. Doesn't matter how you look, doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter. There's a lid for every pot. Someone's going to be attracted to you. Someone's going to like you. The question is, are you going to be there to meet them? Are you going to go out there and meet somebody? Are you going to, so is it something that they're willing to do, and is it something that's in the cards? I had someone recently. She wasn't going out and meeting anyone. She wasn't doing anything to beautify herself. She wasn't anything doing about her health. Her health was going down. And it came out. It's like, look, if you start taking care of your health, and if you do a health regime that renews you, you're going to start meeting people. She didn't want to do it. She had no interest in doing. She had no interest in getting out there, but she wanted to hear someone was coming, and it wasn't going to happen that way. But if she went another way, she could change it. She didn't want to do it. So it wasn't in the cards for her. So ask yourself, is it in the cards for them or not? What are they willing to do to get it? This isn't omniscient time where you get to tell them everything's going to fall in their lap, because it's not the way it works. It never works that way. And if it does work that way, where something falls in someone's lap, probably because they set the seeds for it at some point earlier to make that happen. So there was an intention to make that happen, or some work that made that happen, or something in that case. People do sometimes have a windfall, and it comes out of nowhere. And that comes up too, but you can't guarantee it. And you can't say, well, this is how you make that windfall happen. Unless you go to some kind of other practitioner, in which case that's okay too. I'm not saying that you can't go to someone, say, who's a hoodoo practitioner and do something to make that happen. But remember, you're making a contract in that case, and know that you are making a contract and know what that deal is that you're making. So sometimes it just isn't in the cards for the person, and you might be able to ask yourself, I'm not seeing it in the cards. Well, what could you do to make that happen? And then you look at, see what the card meanings are, what the process is. So for example, someone says, I want to fall in love. How do I make, and you're like, it's not in the cards, but what could you do to make that happen? So let's use my Once Upon a Time oracle. So we got, okay, so be dedicated and devoted to renewal and a second chance at life. Also, be a good friend. Worry about being a friend first. Stop bringing up bad past stuff and garbage in your head and chattering to other people about bad past relationships. Be focused on something hopeful and bigger than just relationship. And the soulmate is likely to show up. So that's how you do it. Okay, that was the fish and the ship in that last one. Okay, so that's it. So then so then number 4, what do you believe that this particular answer is? Or no, here it is. I'm sorry. I can't read my own writing. Why do you believe that this particular answer is psychically in the cards? If the person isn't aware of it himself or herself, you probably won't be able to pick up on it. So a lot of times what we get is in the cards is coming psychically off the person you're reading, and the fact is, if they don't know what the answer is, you probably struggle to get it yourself. So if they've never asked any questions why or how or what, I have this all the time. People are like, well, what should I do? And you're like, well, what are you interested in? I'm not interested in anything. I don't want to do anything. But how can I be happy and do this? And they aren't willing to move one little bit. They aren't willing to invest in anything. They aren't like, well, what if I do that and it doesn't work out? And it's like, well, how will you know? So how do you know if you don't go down and take that cooking class that you won't meet someone that you fall in love with, who will have a business and something else that leads you to something else, and you end up somewhere else, and then something else happens, and then boom, you're happy. Could happen. Sometimes you do one thing that leads you to another thing. So people come to you all the time. They're like, should I do this? Is this the right path? And you're like, for what? Do you want to learn something? Do you want to be curious? Everyone wants to know right away. It's like, what can I do to make lots of money? And what can I do to make a relationship? And you're like, there's steps in between. Set little goals. So sometimes they'll come to you and they'll be like, I want to know how to make this business from nothing. And you're like, well, what interests do you have? And they're like, nothing, but I want to be an entrepreneur. And you're like, well, you got to start with a why or a what or a how or a curiosity, something. What little thing can you start with? So if they don't know, a lot of times you won't be able to pick it up. So quite often when you have the most successful is when someone under the surface knows what it is that they really want to do. You can pull it out. Sometimes. There are people who can do it another way. They'll hear what's going on in the cards. And I'm not saying there's not something else going on in the cards, because there is something else going on in the cards. And sometimes someone could put things together and put a piece together and goes, oh, I might want to do it that way. But you got to be real careful that you don't summon someone down I remember there was a famous psychic. I remember used to watch her sometimes, and everyone's like, "What's my life purpose?" And she'd be like, "You're a nurse. You're a school teacher. And it was all of the big curriculum, big things that were going big in school at the time. So the nursing programs were taking huge amounts of students coming in, and you're a teacher. She told her everything's safe, and it's like, oh, I'm a teacher. And now someone else in your life is telling you how to do something. Because we got enough people telling us who we're supposed to be. So what I always encourage people is like, well, what am I supposed to be? And then I'll say, okay, what question can you ask yourself? So a woman comes to me, she says, what am I supposed to be? And I'll go, well, let's see what questions, Again with the dog. And again with the lily. So I would say in this case, what did you abandon early in your life? Or what have you ever been consistent about in your life? What consistently has been the thing in your life over and over and over again that you've given to friends and given to people and given to others? Well, what's the one thing consistently that you've given in your life to people? And get the person to start thinking, because if they do it over and over again, it's likely that maybe there's an answer in that to them. So that's what you do. You start to ask them maybe questions, okay? It's not your job to be omniscient. So last one. Try this approach. Instead of trying to have all the answers for everyone, everywhere that comes up to you, try this. Well, what happens if so-and-so does this? So you say, hey, what road are you planning on going down? And they're like, well, right now I'm going to go down this. So then you go, well, what happens if the person does that? And then you throw the cards out and you see where they're headed. Say, now, did you have another thing in mind? And they go, well, yeah, I thought maybe I want to do this. And then you throw those and you see what happens in that way if they go down that road. So it's not a case of I'm going to come up with all of this. There's all these wonderful stories about, these famous old psychics who came, they could tell you what happened down the street, round the corner, there's a little more going on in those cases than those stories tell. And that's all I'm going to say. And I'm not going to say that the human mind isn't capable of that or psychic ability isn't capable of that. It is. But really, do you want to be responsible for all of these deep down, dark, psychological pieces of people and tell them, this is what I pulled out of your subconscious and this is what you're supposed to do? I guarantee you, if you try to do that, you're going to find a lot of problems. Because in a lot of cases, it's buried deep down in their subconscious for a reason, because they're not ready to face it. So what can you do little-wise? Little pieces, little questions can you ask them that help them start to get to that stuff themselves? There's way too much. There's authors and gurus. Everyone's out there trying to tell everyone what they're supposed to be. What the answer to all their problems is. What the answer to them. What one little thing can you do to take action today? What the cards can tell you. So how can you help one person take a little bit of action? Okay, you got to build a foundation here. What is it that you as a woman would like to do? What's your skill? We got to build a little foundation, a little skill foundation here. So a woman comes to you, okay, well, let's see what skill, and then what area. Okay, do you like to talk to people? Do you like to communicate with people? Do you like social situations? Okay, so we know that you have a background in social situations. We can start to ask, what are your talents? Things like that. But I've got to have this whole answer, And then the other problem is that it does sound cliche if you go, love yourself. No one wants to hear that. They're going to come to you, they're going to pay you whatever, you're going to love yourself. Yeah, in a lot of cases it's true. People do need to love themselves, they need to forgive themselves, whatever, but it does kind of sound, okay, so what can they do to do that? If they knew that, they wouldn't be coming to you. So what little tiny thing? So it's like, okay, well, what could this person do to accept themselves? Okay, maybe it's time to start a health regime. Maybe it's time to start to pay a little more attention to your health and what's going on in your body. Start there. See what that does for your mood and your attitude. Okay? So, recap. So, how do I not sound cliche in giving a remedy or approach for when a person has a question? How big is the experience in that area that you're reading about? You're not supposed to be omniscient. And I used to say this. When I was a writing professor, people will come to me and they'd say, how do I write a book? And I'd say, live an exciting life. So if you're not getting out there and experiencing a lot of things, and living an exciting life with a lot of experiences, what experience do you have to draw from? If you're sitting at home completely reclusive and terrified of people and don't want to be around them, and I hear this all the time, well, I can't deal with people, they're so negative. And I get it. Sometimes people who are empathic and sense other people's stuff are very good at doing readings. But if you can't be around people, what experience can you draw from to help them to become more successful people who spend their days around other people? So ask yourself, what experience are you drawing from? I know people are going to flip about this video. Okay, so sometimes the answer isn't something the person wants to hear. Remember that. And if they don't want to hear it, you may see that in the cards. The answer may be limited. Other times, sometimes the outcome that they're expecting just isn't in the cards, and you're not going to see it no matter how hard you look. But you could answer at that point, what do they need to change in their behavior to make that happen? And sometimes that changes the outcome. Some people don't believe that's true, but try it and you'll see you really can change things. Otherwise, why bother to read these if you can't change the outcome? So then what do you believe that this particular answer, why do you believe this particular answer is psychically in the cards? If the person isn't aware of it himself or herself, then they probably won't be able to pick it up yourself. So maybe they don't even know deep down what it is, because for so long they've been pushing, who they really are down, that you can't get to it. And it's really hard to get to something like that in an hour or 45 minutes. And maybe this is the wrong tool for that in that case. Also, you need to be able to develop tools to help people bring that stuff out. But that's a whole other story, and it takes a lot of experience, a lot of practice to be able to do that. And finally, try this approach. What happens if you do X that you're planning? What happens if you do Y you're planning? What if you change to do this? It will give you other options. So you can say to the person, hey, if you take this house, you get this. If you take that house, if you go this way, you go this, you get it that way. So give them options. What happens if you go to this school and try this? What happens if you try that? Remember this too. People will always say, am I on the right path? For what? I always say, for what? Just because you don't get $1 million studying this subject doesn't mean that subject won't lead to something else. So people want to know, a lot of people want to know right away, it's like, give me a narrow path of the least amount of work that I have to do that makes me what? And then you go, what, do you want a rich experience in life or do you want a tiny little experience? A lot of people want to know just how little they have to do to stay on the couch and eat Cheetos and watch TV. So if that's how they spend most of their time and they're trying to ask you about fulfillment, there's some steps here that gets to that. Also, people end up making all sorts of problems for themselves by gripping on and holding on to things like security and things like that. And then you see all these layers and you're like, whoa, this is a lot of layers to get through. So I'm going to ask you guys who are having this problem with clients, is like, well, how do I give them the right answer? First of all, how long are you going for? How long have they spent building up these problems? How honest with themselves are they? And why are you the one that's supposed to come up with all the answers? So instead of trying to become the all-knowing wizard, the omniscient Buddha, who is supposed to have all of the answers, why don't you look at it this way? How can they meet you halfway? What questions can you come up that will help them unlock? Now, I've done another video on doing things oracularly where you come up with a very unusual riddle. And quite frankly, the real way that you should be able to do these is to read them and come up with a riddle. The riddle itself, the riddle itself should help to unlock pieces of himself to bring it out. But that takes an understanding of how the human subconscious works. And there's there's quite a bit of practice that you need to get to before you can start to ask these sort of oracular questions. And if you just tune in and you go into a deep sort of alpha psychic state, you can get it where you get the questions. So for example, the child's house was blown down by the wind that blew the ship in the wrong direction and left the sails twisted, so that now the road of the woman is not the right road and travels in the wrong direction. The message is to hang free and allow oneself to fall instead of gripping tightly. to the grapes that bring a bitter taste. And you let the person chew on it, and you let their subconscious chew on it. But that's a whole other story. I'm Lucky Links. I hope this helps. I hope this actually gives you some practical advice, some way to go about this. Let yourself off the hook. You're not supposed to have all the answers. They don't have all the answers. You don't have all the answers. But if you set it up where you meet halfway, their psychic energy, your psychic energy are going to meet. So if you get yourself out of the way, their psychic energy, your psychic energy is going to meet. And when it's really working, when you're really good at it, you're really practice, you'll be able to get stuff coming off of them that they're not able to grasp, and then you can help them to see it. And then if they can see it, it might jog something free inside of them. So, I'm Lucky Links. As always, wishing you success and good fortune in all you do. What's your pain, your difficulty, your challenge in doing readings? Put it in the thing below. I'll do my best to do a video about it. And until next time, have a great week.